The train had long since left the last signs of the living world behind when I first saw the outline of Valemount Manor against the white of a dying winter sky. The fields lay frozen, the fences half buried in snow, and the trees stood like black skeletons in their glassy prisons of ice. It was February of 1932, and the cold had lingered longer than anyone could remember. The conductor looked back at me as if to ask, "Are you certain you wish to go there?" But I had already made my decision. I had been summoned by Countess Alara herself. Her letter, written in an elegant hand, spoke of a need for a chronicler to catalogue the archives of her late husband's estate. It was not the promise of money that drew me, but a deep curiosity. The Valemonts were an old noble house, but their name was now spoken only in hushed whispers, wrapped in rumors that cling to old stones and even older graves. When I stepped off the train, the cold seized my lungs like a final warning. A single black carriage waited, drawn by two white horses that steamed like ghosts in the frigid air. We traveled for an hour through winding, frozen lanes until the manor came into view, vast, brooding, its spires rising like spears through the mist. As the carriage stopped, I remember thinking I had arrived not at a house, but at a tomb. Countess Alara awaited me at the threshold. She was tall, thin, with a strange beauty that time had not yet conquered, but soon would. Her hair was the color of silver spun through ash, and her eyes were a startling gray, like stormlight over snow. "Mr. Alden," she said, her voice quiet yet commanding, "you are most welcome at Valemount." The entrance hall was a cathedral of shadows, smelling of wood smoke and cold stone. Somewhere deep within the manor, a clock ticked with a slow, deliberate sound, like a heartbeat. The Countess explained my task. Her late husband, Count Armand, had left behind journals and correspondences, all locked within the library. "I wish them to be arranged," she said, "and prepared for preservation." "May I ask how long the Count has been gone?" I inquired. Her gaze drifted toward the fire. "7 winters," she said softly. "He vanished one night during the thaw. Some say he fell into the lake, others prefer silence." My first night at Valemount was filled with an uneasy quiet. The wind moaned through the chimneys, but beneath it was another sound, a faint, rhythmic creak, like footsteps on frozen ground. I went to the window. Beyond the courtyard lay a garden, and in its center, half buried in frost, was a greenhouse. Inside, a light flickered briefly, then vanished. The next morning, I mentioned it to the Countess. "You saw the frost garden," she said, her voice flat. "It is sealed, has been for years." Her eyes held mine, and for a moment I thought I saw fear in them. The library was a world unto itself. I spent the day among the dusty shelves and soon began reading Count Armand's journals. His entries grew stranger as the years advanced, filled with sketches of winter flowers and notes on preserving rare species. Then came the final volume, from the year he disappeared. He wrote obsessively of the frost garden. "January 12th, he wrote. "The cold deepens, and yet within the glass dome, life persists. The lilies bloom against reason. There is a rhythm beneath the ice, a heartbeat in the soil. I have heard it call my name." And then the final entry, "Tonight I shall open the lower hatch. If I do not return, let it be known that I followed beauty to its end." That night, sleep came only in fragments. I dreamed of frozen lilies whispering names. When I woke, the candle beside my bed had burned low, and the window stood open. Below, a figure moved among the frozen hedges. A woman, in white. I couldn't resist. I dressed quickly and descended into the courtyard. The garden gate was brittle with frost. One twist, and it gave way. Inside, the air was heavy, damp despite the cold. The greenhouse stood before me like a crystal cathedral, and from within I heard a whisper. I wiped the frost from a glass panel and peered inside. The garden bloomed, impossibly, in full color, lilies of glass, roses of ice, and in the center, on a marble seat, sat a woman draped in white. She raised her head. Her face was not the Countess's, yet it bore her likeness, younger, untouched by sorrow. Her eyes met mine through the frost, and a cold deeper than winter moved through me. Then the light went out. When I came to, I was lying on the path. The gate was shut. The Countess met me in the hall. "You went to the garden," she said, not as a question. "I saw," I began, but she raised a hand. "Do not speak of what you saw. You must promise me. Do not return there." "Who is she?" I had to ask. The Countess turned away, her shoulders trembling. "Once," she whispered, "she was my sister. That night, the frost deepened. Yet I heard it again, that faint rhythm, the heartbeat beneath the earth. I went to the window and saw it, a faint pulse of light from the glass dome, like a heart still beating under ice. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Count Armand Vallemont had never left the garden. He was still there, beneath the frost. The frost crept across my window, not like weather, but like a parasite consuming the house. Vallemont Manor had fallen silent. I breakfasted alone, the long table set for 20, yet I was the only soul there. The Countess did not appear. I couldn't eat. The memory of the previous night, the face in the greenhouse, a mirror of the Countess yet not her, haunted me. I sought refuge in the Count's library, hoping to lose myself in his papers. I found a journal embossed with a single word: Speculum. The mirror. Inside, the handwriting was frantic. Sketches of faces and reflections filled the margins. One page showed the greenhouse, a shaft drawn beneath its floor. "The surface deceives," the Count had written. "Beneath the frost, the garden breathes." And then another note. "Ilara's image lingers where no mirror stands. She says she never enters the garden, and yet her reflection is there before me." As I read, a sound, like glass shifting, drew my eyes to the window. My reflection moved, but not with me. It lingered a heartbeat too long. I stepped closer, my breath misting the pain, and in that mist I saw another face beside my own, pale, feminine, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then the window cracked. I found Countess Ilara in the music room. "You've been reading his writings," she said, her voice low. I told her what I'd read about the reflections, about seeing her in the frost garden. "He was ill," she insisted. "He believed he saw things." But when I tried to tell her what I had seen, she cut me off. "Enough. There are things in this house that exist only because they are unacknowledged. Promise me you'll leave the garden be." That night the wind hissed through the eaves. In my window pane I saw her again, the woman from the garden, closer this time. Her lips moved. I pressed my palm to the glass, and to my horror, a warm hand met mine from the other side. Just then my door creaked open. It was Countess Ilara, a candle in her hand. "Who was she?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed ancient. "Her name was Seraphine," she whispered. "My twin." She told me Seraphine had drowned in the frozen lake years ago. The Count, who had loved Seraphine first, married Ilara out of grief but never stopped searching for his lost love, his reflection in the ice and glass. "He vanished one winter," she said. "They found nothing, only the frost garden, blooming in the dead of winter." She looked toward the window where the frost was melting. Our reflections appeared, but between us stood a third figure. Seraphine. "She follows the warmth," Ilara whispered. "The garden keeps her image alive." Sleep was impossible. I heard a faint metallic sound and followed it down the cold, dark corridors to the east wing. The doors to the frost garden stood ajar. The greenhouse shimmered with a cold, living light. Inside, the air smelled of violets and decay. At the center stood a tall, silver-framed mirror, As I approached, the frost on its surface cleared. I saw my reflection, but Seraphine stood behind me. Her voice echoed in my mind. He is here, beneath the roots, beneath the ice. The mirror rippled. Beneath its surface I saw a man's face, eyes open in eternal astonishment. Count Armand Vallemont. The glass fractured and a pale mist poured out, filled with shattered memories. When it cleared, the mirror was whole again, and I was alone. The next morning, the greenhouse was gone, the snow smooth and unbroken. I found the Countess in the chapel. "It is over," she whispered. "The frost has claimed what it was owed." But as she spoke, I saw Seraphine's reflection in the polished marble floor behind her, watching, waiting. I left Vallemont Manor before dawn. As the carriage rolled away, the Countess pressed a locket into my hand. Inside, a portrait of two identical women. As the sun rose, I caught sight of a reflection in the carriage window. Faint, fleeting, and impossible. A face beside my own, smiling. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey. If you enjoy tales of mystery and the supernatural, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Stay curious and stay safe. For days after I left Vallemont, the snow never stopped. I watched the world turn white from my carriage window, as if everything was buried under the same shroud as that forsaken estate. I told myself the nightmare was behind me. But a frost that seeps into your mind doesn't melt so easily. I traveled south for 3 days, but every reflection, a window pane, a frozen puddle, held the faint shimmer of the greenhouse dome. At first, I thought it was just memory. But on the third night, on a train thundering through an icy valley, I glanced at the window. Reflected faintly, I saw a woman seated opposite me, even though the seat was empty. Her eyes were gray. Her hair, silver waves, and on her lips, that impossible smile. Seraphine. I whipped my head around. Nothing. Just my own hollow-eyed reflection staring back. That night, I dreamt of Vallemont again, half buried in snow, silent and blind. But beneath it, I heard a pulse, like a heart still beating under the ice. Weeks passed. I returned to my life in London, but the cold never left my bones. Then a parcel arrived. No return address, just the Vallemont crest. A rose and thorns stamped in silver wax. Inside was a book bound in black leather, its pages edged with frost. The title read, Speculum II. I opened it. The handwriting wasn't Armand's or mine. It was Countess Alara's. March 9th, it began. The frost returned last night. The glasshouse breathes again. I heard his voice through the panes. He called her name, not mine. Then, March 11th. The reflection grows restless. When I pass the mirror, she stands nearer. I think she envies my breath. The final entry was dated March 14th. If this reaches you, Mr. Alden, know that I have gone to join them. There is no keeping the heart apart from its reflection. The frost garden awaits. The last line was just a blot of ink. Outside my window, though it was April, faint white flakes began to fall. I had to go back. Something stronger than fear pulled me north. By the time I reached Vallemont, dusk had fallen. The gates were open. The manor was dark, silent, and colder than a grave. Dust lay thick everywhere. "Countess," I called out. Only the ticking of a clock answered. I followed the sound to the east wing. The door to the frost garden, once sealed, now hung open. Beyond it, the courtyard gleamed like glass under the moon. And there, impossibly, the greenhouse stood once more, whole and pristine, glowing with a soft blue light. I stepped inside. The air was neither warm nor cold. It felt like the space between heartbeats. Every frozen petal seemed to tremble with life. At the center, on a marble seat, sat Countess Alara. Frost clung to her lashes. She was at peace, but too still. Before her stood the great mirror, its surface glowing, and within it I saw her reflection, standing, breathing, alive. The mirrored Ilara opened her eyes and smiled, pressing a hand against the glass. A crack spread across its surface. Then another hand appeared from within, a man's hand. Count Armand. The mirror rippled. Ilara's reflection turned, and beside her stood Seraphine. The two women were identical, two halves of the same sorrow. As their fingers met, the glass shattered, not with a crash, but with a sigh. A cold, white light burst forth. For a moment, I saw them all, Ilara, Seraphine, Armand, their faces serene as they faded into the radiance. When my sight returned, the mirror was gone. The greenhouse was empty. Ilara's body had vanished. Only her locket lay on the seat. I picked it up. The miniature inside had changed. It now showed three figures, the sisters and the Count, frozen in a moment of reunion. A soft wind stirred the air. The frost on the glass began to melt. Behind me, the dome collapsed silently into snow. Spring returned to the valley so suddenly the villagers called it a miracle. No trace of Valamont's mistress was ever found. I found one last note from Ilara in the library. When the frost takes the garden, remember that ice is only memory made still. What we call death is merely reflection. The ink had frozen mid-line. Years have passed. I now live by the southern coast where winters are kind. But on certain nights, when the sea's surface stills to glass, I see the faint outline of a dome beneath the waves. Sometimes I hear a piano. When I look in the window, there are three figures reflected behind me. They just watch, as if waiting for the frost to claim me too, so I might join them in the garden where nothing ever truly dies. The frost never leaves. It just sleeps. And somewhere in that quiet remembrance, the garden breathes still. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing for more tales from the archives.